cleaning lady works late to help stressed executive, never suspecting he's the company owner. Some connections happen in the quiet moments when no one else is watching. They happen when hearts recognize each other across impossible divides, when kindness becomes the bridge between two souls who never should have met. This is the story of Chantel Simmons and William Dawson, a cleaning lady and a billionaire CEO whose late-night encounter would shatter every assumption they'd ever made about love, worth, and the courage it takes to reach across the spaces that separate us. Picture this: it's 2 a.m. at Dawson Enterprises, one of the most prestigious corporations in the city. The gleaming floors reflect the soft glow of emergency lighting, and the air carries the faint scent of expensive leather and polished mahogany. Most of the building sleeps in darkness, but on the 42nd floor, light spills from a corner office where papers are scattered like fallen leaves across an enormous mahogany desk. Chantel Simmons pushes her cleaning cart down the hushed corridor, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the marble floor. She moves with quiet grace despite her exhaustion, her dark eyes alert and intelligent behind the weariness that comes from working 2 jobs to keep her family afloat. At 34, she carries herself with a dignity that her worn cleaning uniform can't diminish. There's something in the way she holds her shoulders, the careful attention she pays to every detail of her work, that speaks of inner strength and pride. She pauses outside the corner office, surprised to see someone still working at this ungodly hour. Through the glass walls, she sees a man hunched over his desk, his expensive suit jacket draped over his chair, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. William Dawson, though she knows him only as Mr. Dawson, one of the senior executives who occasionally works late, looks utterly defeated. His dark hair is mussed from running his hands through it, and even from her position in the hallway, Chantel can see the tension radiating from his broad shoulders. Papers surround him like evidence of a lost battle. 3 empty coffee cups sit abandoned on his desk, their contents long cold. His blue eyes, usually sharp with authority, are clouded with exhaustion and something that looks dangerously close to despair. This isn't the composed executive she's glimpsed in passing. This is a man at the end of his rope, fighting battles she can't see but somehow understands in her bones. Chantel hesitates in the doorway, her hand tightening on the handle of her cart. Every instinct tells her to move on, to leave him to his private struggle. After all, what business does a cleaning lady have offering comfort to a man who probably makes more in a month than she does in a year? But something in his posture, the way his head is buried in his hands, the defeated slump of his shoulders, tugs at her heart with irresistible force. Before she can talk herself out of it, Chantel knocks softly on the glass door. William's head snaps up, his blue eyes wide with surprise. For a moment, they simply look at each other across the expanse of his office, she in her simple navy uniform with her cart of cleaning supplies, he in his rumpled designer shirt surrounded by the chaos of corporate warfare. "I'm sorry to bother you, Mr. Dawson," Chantel says softly, her voice carrying the warm honey tones that could soothe even the most frazzled soul. "I noticed you're still here, and I was wondering, would you like me to make you some fresh coffee?" That pot's been sitting there for hours. William stares at her for a long moment, as if he can't quite process what he's hearing. When was the last time someone offered him something without wanting anything in return? When was the last time anyone noticed his exhaustion and offered simple, human kindness? "You don't have to do that," he says, but his voice lacks conviction. There's something in her eyes, a warmth, a genuine concern, that makes his chest tighten with an emotion he can't name. "I know I don't have to," Chantel replies gently, stepping into his office with quiet confidence. "But it looks like you're fighting some pretty tough battles in here, and everybody needs backup sometimes. Have you ever wondered what might happen if you showed kindness to someone who didn't expect it? What doors might open, what walls might crumble, what hearts might find their way to each other in the most impossible circumstances?" If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting against all odds have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. The coffee machine in William's office is one of those expensive Italian models that most people would need an instruction manual to operate, but Chantel moves around it with surprising familiarity. Her movements are efficient and graceful, and William finds himself watching the way her slender fingers work, the careful attention she pays to every detail. There's something almost meditative about the way she goes about her task, as if making coffee is an act of love rather than mere service. "You know your way around that machine," William observes, his voice rough with exhaustion and something else, curiosity about this woman who moves through his world like a gentle breeze, noticed by few but somehow essential. Chantel glances over her shoulder with a small smile that transforms her entire face. "I used to work in an office," she admits, then seems to catch herself, as if she's revealed too much. Before life happened. There's a story there, William realizes, hidden behind her careful professionalism. He wants to ask more, but something in her posture tells him she's not ready to share. Instead, he watches as she prepares the coffee with the kind of care usually reserved for precious things, measuring the grounds with precision, adjusting the temperature with practiced ease. "I've been trying to solve this acquisition deal for 6 hours, William says suddenly, surprising himself with the admission. He never talks about work with the cleaning staff. Hell, he barely talks about work with his own executives. But something about Chantel's presence, her quiet competence, makes him want to fill the comfortable silence. "Every solution I come up with creates 3 new problems." Chantel turns, holding a steaming cup of coffee that smells like heaven. She approaches his desk with careful steps, and William notices the way she moves, not like someone trying to be invisible, but like someone who knows her own worth despite what others might think. "Sometimes when I'm stuck on something, I find it helps to step back and look at the bigger picture," she says softly, setting the coffee down near his right hand. "Maybe the problem isn't the solution, maybe it's the question you're asking." William looks up at her sharply. That's not the kind of insight he'd expect from, but then he stops himself, ashamed of his own assumptions. "Who says wisdom only comes wrapped in expensive suits and MBA degrees?" "What do you mean?" he asks, genuinely curious. Chantel hesitates, as if she's about to cross a line she can't uncross. "Well, I couldn't help but notice some of the documents while I was cleaning yesterday." "The Patterson Group acquisition?" She sees his nod and continues carefully. "Instead of trying to figure out how to make their systems work with yours, what if you asked whether you need to keep their systems at all? Sometimes the most expensive solution is trying to fix what's already broken." William stares at her, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. In one simple observation, she's cut through hours of complex financial modeling to the heart of what's been nagging at him all night. The Patterson Group's outdated infrastructure isn't an asset to be preserved, it's a liability to be replaced. "You have a business background," he says, "and it's not a question." "I have a degree in business administration from State University," Chantel admits, her voice quiet but proud. "I worked for Morrison Financial for 3 years before." She trails off, her eyes growing distant. "Before what?" William asks gently. "Before my ex-husband left us with nothing but debt and a daughter who needed stability more than I needed career advancement," Chantel says simply. There's no self-pity in her voice, just the quiet strength of someone who's made hard choices and found peace with them. Cleaning pays the bills, and it's honest work. There's dignity in taking care of things, in making spaces better than you found them. William feels something shift in his chest, a recognition that goes deeper than attraction, deeper than curiosity. Here's a woman who gave up her dreams to protect her child, who found purpose in service, who sees value where others see only labor. When was the last time he'd met someone so genuinely selfless? "How old is your daughter?" he asks, surprising himself again with his personal interest. Chantel's face lights up with maternal pride. "Sophia's 16. She's brilliant, straight A's, wants to study engineering. She's everything I could have hoped for and more." The love in her voice is so pure, so complete, that William feels a stab of something that might be envy. When was the last time anyone spoke about him with such unconditional devotion? When was the last time he felt worthy of it? "She's lucky to have you," he says, meaning it completely. "I'm the lucky one," Chantel replies. "She gives me purpose, reminds me every day that love is the only wealth that really matters." They fall into comfortable silence, William sipping his coffee and marveling at how perfect it tastes, Chantel beginning to tidy his office with the same careful attention she brings to everything. She doesn't disturb his papers, just clears away the cold coffee cups and straightens the chaos around the edges. There's something deeply soothing about her presence, something that makes the crushing pressure of his responsibilities feel lighter. The coffee's perfect, William says softly. Thank you. You're welcome. Chantel's smile is warm and genuine. Sometimes we all need someone to take care of us, even if it's just making sure we have something warm to drink in the middle of a long night. As she moves around his office, William finds himself stealing glances at her. There's an elegance to her movements despite her simple uniform, an intelligence in her dark eyes that makes him wonder what stories she carries, what dreams she's set aside. She's beautiful in a way that has nothing to do with makeup or expensive clothes. It's the kind of beauty that comes from inner strength, from kindness that expects nothing in return. Mr. Dawson? Chantel's voice is soft, almost hesitant. Yes? Whatever battle you're fighting in here, she says, gesturing to the papers on his desk, remember that you don't have to win it all tonight. Sometimes the best strategy is knowing when to rest so you can fight better tomorrow. Their eyes meet across his desk, and something passes between them, a moment of understanding, of connection that neither expected. William feels his breath catch slightly, awareness prickling along his skin. There's something in her gaze, something warm and knowing and infinitely kind, that makes him feel seen in a way he hasn't experienced in years. I should let you get back to work, Chantel says softly, but she doesn't move immediately. For a heartbeat, they simply look at each other, the air between them charged with possibility. Thank you, William says, his voice rougher than he intended. For the coffee. For the advice. For. He trails off, unsure how to name what she's given him. For seeing you, Chantel finishes gently, and William's chest tightens with the accuracy of her words. As she moves toward the door with her cleaning cart, William has the strangest urge to call her back, to extend this moment of connection. But propriety holds him silent, and he watches her disappear into the hallway with something that feels dangerously close to longing. What would you do if you found yourself drawn to someone completely outside your social circle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your perspectives on love that crosses boundaries. The next morning finds Chantel in her small apartment, moving through her routine with the efficiency born of necessity. The space is modest but immaculate, every surface clean and every object in its place. Sunlight streams through curtains she sewed herself, illuminating family photos and her daughter's academic awards that cover one wall like badges of honor. Mom, you're humming, 16-year-old Sophia Simmons observes from the kitchen table, where she's hunched over her calculus homework. She's a stunning girl, all long limbs and natural grace, with her mother's intelligent eyes and a smile that could light up entire rooms. Am I? Chantel asks, pausing in her preparation of their simple breakfast. She hadn't realized, but there's a lightness in her chest this morning, a warmth that has nothing to do with the coffee she's brewing. You haven't hummed in months, Sophia says, studying her mother with the perception that comes from being raised by a single parent. Good night at work? Different night, Chantel admits, setting a plate of eggs and toast in front of her daughter. Sometimes you meet people who remind you that kindness still exists in the world. Sophia raises an eyebrow, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that it makes Chantel smile. A person, Mom? Like a specific person? Just someone who needed coffee and conversation, Chantel says, but she can feel heat rising in her cheeks. Eat your breakfast, baby girl. You've got that chemistry test today. But as Sophia chatters about her upcoming test and her plans with friends, Chantel finds her thoughts drifting back to the quiet intensity of William Dawson's blue eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. She shakes her head, trying to focus on reality. Men like William Dawson don't fall for women like her, women who clean offices and stretch paychecks and dream in the spaces between exhaustion. Still, she can't quite shake the memory of his smile when she'd made him laugh, or the way her skin had tingled when their fingers brushed as she handed him his coffee cup. Meanwhile, across the city in a penthouse apartment that costs more per month than most people make in a year, William Dawson stands at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city spread below him like a glittering circuit board. The space around him is all sharp angles and expensive materials, glass and steel and leather that speaks of success but somehow feels cold despite its obvious luxury. He should be preparing for his morning meetings, should be reviewing the Patterson acquisition files that Chantel's insight had helped him crack open like a puzzle box. Instead, he finds himself thinking about the way she'd moved through his office with quiet grace, the warmth in her voice when she'd spoken about her daughter, the intelligence in her observations about his business challenges. Sir? His housekeeper, Mrs. Hendricks, appears in the doorway with his usual breakfast: coffee, whole grain toast, fresh fruit arranged with geometric precision. Your car will be here in 20 minutes. Thank you, Mrs. Hendricks. William accepts the coffee but finds himself comparing it to the perfect cup Chantel had made him just hours ago. This coffee is good, excellent, even, but it lacks something indefinable, some quality that had made that late-night cup taste like comfort itself. His phone buzzes with a text from Luke Reynolds, his business partner and closest thing to a friend. Board meeting moved to 10. Diana wants lunch to discuss the Patterson deal. Mother called 3 times. William grimaces at the mention of Diana Ashford, his ex-fiancée who seems determined to become his current fiancée despite his distinct lack of interest. Their families had been trying to orchestrate their reunion for months, and Diana had been increasingly persistent in her pursuit. She was beautiful, accomplished, from the right social circles, everything his mother insisted he needed in a wife. Everything that left him feeling empty and restless. As he dresses for another day of meetings and obligations, William finds himself wondering what Chantel is doing this morning. Is she getting her daughter ready for school? Is she thinking about their conversation, or has it already faded into the background of her busy life? He catches himself in the mirror, adjusting his tie with hands that are steadier than they have any right to be after only 3 hours of sleep. Something about that encounter last night had left him feeling more centered than he'd felt in months, as if her quiet wisdom had reached something in him that board meetings and profit margins couldn't touch. The drive to Dawson Enterprises takes William through parts of the city he rarely sees from the backseat of his executive sedan. Tree-lined streets give way to modest apartment buildings, small businesses with hand-painted signs, school crossing guards helping children safely across busy intersections. Somewhere in this sprawling urban landscape, Chantel is probably dropping her daughter off at school, maybe stopping at a grocery store to stretch her budget a little further, maybe thinking about the strange executive who'd kept her later than usual with his troubles. The thought of her navigating her daily challenges with the same quiet strength she'd shown in his office makes something tighten in William's chest. When was the last time he'd worried about grocery budgets or school supplies? When was the last time he'd had to choose between his dreams and his child's needs? By the time his car pulls into the executive parking garage at Dawson Enterprises, William has made a decision that surprises him with its clarity. Tonight, he's going to work late again. Not because he has pressing business, the Patterson acquisition is practically solved thanks to Chantel's insight, but because he wants to see her again. He wants to understand what it is about her presence that makes him feel more like himself than he has in years. The day passes in a blur of meetings and decisions, but underneath it all, William finds himself thinking about coffee made with care, about wisdom wrapped in humility, about the way Chantel's eyes had softened when she'd spoken about taking care of people. His assistant notices his distraction, Luke comments on his unusually good mood despite his obvious exhaustion, and Diana's persistent texts go unanswered as William counts down the hours until evening. Because sometimes, in the quiet spaces between our carefully constructed lives, we meet someone who reminds us what it feels like to be truly seen. And once you've had that taste of genuine connection, everything else feels like settling for less than your heart deserves. Chapter 2. That evening, Chantel arrives for her shift with a flutter of anticipation she tries desperately to ignore. She's told herself a dozen times that last night was an anomaly, a moment of human connection that means nothing beyond simple kindness. But as she changes into her uniform in the building's staff locker room, she catches herself checking her reflection, smoothing her hair with hands that aren't quite steady. "You're being ridiculous," she whispers to her reflection. "He's probably forgotten you already." But even as she says it, she can't quite believe it. There had been something in his eyes, something that spoke of recognition deeper than their brief encounter should have warranted. She'd felt it too, that sense of connection, of understanding that went beyond words. Maggie Carter, the night supervisor, bustles into the locker room with her usual efficiency. She's a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that miss nothing, someone who's seen enough workplace drama to be deeply suspicious of any deviation from routine. "Chantel, honey, I need you on the executive floors tonight," Maggie says, consulting her clipboard. 41st through 43rd. "Martha called in sick again." "Of course," Chantel replies, trying to keep her voice neutral. The executive floors include William's office, and she hates the way her pulse quickens at the thought. "And Chantel?" Maggie's voice carries a note of warning. I heard you were chatting with one of the executives last night. Mr. Dawson. Heat floods Chantel's cheeks. He was working late. I just offered him coffee. I'm sure you did, honey. Maggie's voice is kind but firm. But these corporate types, they live in a different world than us. They might seem friendly, but at the end of the day, we're invisible to them. Best to remember that and keep things professional. Chantel nods, understanding the wisdom in Maggie's words even as something in her rebels against them. I understand. But as she makes her way to the 42nd floor an hour later, her heart is beating just a little too fast, her awareness heightened to every sound, every shadow. The executive level at night has an almost sacred quality, all hushed elegance and subtle lighting, the kind of refined atmosphere that speaks of power and privilege. She approaches William's office with careful steps, telling herself she hopes he's not there, that she can clean around his space and be gone before any awkward encounters. But when she rounds the corner, warm light spills from his office windows, and she can see his familiar silhouette bent over his desk. This time, she doesn't hesitate. Something about the way he's sitting, straight-backed but somehow weary, tugs at her heart with familiar force. She knocks softly on his doorframe, and when he looks up, the smile that spreads across his face is so genuine, so pleased, that it steals her breath. Chantel, he says, and her name sounds different in his voice, warmer, more personal than it has any right to be. Good evening, Mr. Dawson, she replies, proud of how steady her voice sounds. Working late again? It's becoming a habit, William admits, leaning back in his chair. Though I have to say, the company's much better tonight. There's something in his tone, something that makes Chantel's skin warm and her pulse flutter. She's attracted to him, there's no point in denying it anymore. But attraction is dangerous territory for a woman in her position, with responsibilities and vulnerabilities she can't afford to ignore. Coffee, she offers, moving toward his machine with movements that feel more natural tonight, less careful. Please. William watches her with an intensity that makes her hyper-aware of every gesture. How was your day? The question surprises her. When was the last time anyone in her professional life asked about her day like it mattered? Good, she says, measuring coffee grounds with steady hands. Sophia aced her chemistry test, my brother called to check in, and Mrs. Patterson from downstairs brought us homemade cookies. Small victories. Those are the best kind, William says softly. The ones that don't make headlines but make life worth living. Something in his voice makes Chantel look at him more closely. Beneath his expensive clothes and commanding presence, she sees loneliness as familiar as her own reflection. This is a man who knows about empty victories, about success that feels hollow when there's no one to share it with. What about you, she asks, surprising herself with the boldness. Good day? William laughs, but there's no humor in it. I closed a deal worth $50 million, had lunch with investors who want to make me even richer, and got home to an apartment that costs more than most people's houses. And you know what? The best part of my day is sitting right here, talking to someone who asks how I'm doing like the answer actually matters. The honesty in his voice stops Chantel in her tracks. She turns to face him fully, the coffee forgotten, and sees something raw and vulnerable in his blue eyes. It does matter, she says softly. Everyone deserves to have someone who cares about their day, about whether they're okay. Do they? William asks, standing and moving closer to where she stands by the coffee machine. Sometimes I think I've forgotten how to be a person instead of just a position. How to connect with someone without wondering what they want from me. He's close enough now that she can smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that suits him perfectly. Close enough that she has to tilt her head back slightly to meet his eyes. Close enough that the air between them feels charged with possibility. Maybe that's because you're talking to the wrong people, Chantel says, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe I am, William replies, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips before meeting her eyes again. What would you do, Chantel, if you were tired of being surrounded by people who only see your bank account? I'd find someone who sees me, she answers honestly. Someone who cares about my thoughts, my dreams, my fears. Someone who wants to know about my daughter's chemistry test and my neighbor's cookies. Someone like you, William says, and it's not a question. The coffee machine beeps, breaking the spell that settled around them. Chantel turns quickly to pour his coffee, her hands not quite steady, hyper-aware of his presence behind her. When she turns back to hand him the cup, their fingers brush in the exchange, and the contact sends electricity shooting up her arm. William must feel it too, because his grip tightens on the cup, his fingers covering hers for a moment longer than necessary. They stand frozen like that, connected by touch and something deeper, something that makes Chantel's breath catch and her heart race. "Chantel," William says softly, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a caress so gentle it makes her eyes flutter closed. "This is dangerous," she whispers, but she doesn't pull away. "I know," William replies, his voice rough with something that might be desire or desperation or both. "I know it's wrong, I know it's complicated, I know a dozen reasons why we shouldn't be standing here like this. But I can't stop thinking about you." The confession hangs between them, honest and vulnerable and terrifying. Chantel opens her eyes to find William looking at her with an intensity that makes her feel beautiful, desired, seen in ways she'd forgotten were possible. "I think about you too," she admits, the words barely audible. "I tell myself I shouldn't, that it's foolish, but I can't seem to stop." They're standing so close now that she can see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, can feel the warmth radiating from his body. If she leaned forward just slightly, if he bent his head just a little. The sound of footsteps in the hallway breaks them apart like a physical blow. Chantel steps back quickly, her professional mask snapping into place even as her heart pounds against her ribs. William runs a hand through his hair, his breathing slightly uneven. "I should get back to work," Chantel says, her voice shakier than she'd like. "Of course," William replies, but his eyes are still dark with whatever had been building between them. "Chantel?" She pauses at his door, not trusting herself to look back. "Thank you. For the coffee. For everything." She nods once and flees into the hallway, her cleaning cart rattling slightly as she pushes it toward the elevators. But even as she tries to focus on her work, she can feel the imprint of his touch on her skin, can hear the rough honesty in his voice when he'd said he couldn't stop thinking about her. Behind her, in his office, William stands at his window looking out at the city lights, his untouched coffee growing cold on his desk. For the first time in years, he's met someone who makes him want to be better, to be worthy of the kind of love that expects nothing but gives everything. But between them lies a chasm of social expectations, professional boundaries, and the kind of complications that could destroy them both. The question is, will they be brave enough to bridge that gap, or will they let fear keep them apart? As Chantel finishes her rounds on the executive floor, she tries to convince herself that what happened in William's office was a moment of madness, a temporary lapse in judgment that means nothing. But her skin still tingles where he touched her, and her heart still races when she remembers the way he looked at her, like she was something precious, something worth treasuring. She's so lost in thought that she almost doesn't notice the figure waiting by the elevators until she's nearly upon him. Luke Reynolds, William's business partner, stands with his arms crossed, his sharp suit and sharper smile making her immediately wary. "Miss Simmons, isn't it?" Luke says smoothly. "I'm Luke Reynolds. I work with Mr. Dawson." "Good evening, Mr. Reynolds," Chantel replies carefully, instinctively stepping back. Something about his manner sets off every warning bell she possesses. "I couldn't help but notice you've been spending time in William's office lately," Luke continues conversationally. "Very friendly of you to take such personal interest in his well-being." The threat in his words is subtle but unmistakable. Chantel lifts her chin, drawing on the dignity that has carried her through worse challenges than one corporate bully. "Mr. Dawson works very hard," she says evenly. "I simply offered him coffee when I noticed he was here late." "Of course you did." Luke's smile doesn't reach his eyes. "And I'm sure he appreciated the service. But you should know that William has certain responsibilities, certain expectations. His family, his position, his engagement to Diana Ashford, these things matter in our world." The words hit Chantel like physical blows. "Engagement?" Her stomach drops even as she fights to keep her expression neutral. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean," she says quietly. "Don't you?" Luke steps closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Let me be clear, Miss Simmons. Whatever little fantasy you're entertaining about William, it ends now. Men like him don't end up with women like you. They might amuse themselves for a while, but when it comes to serious decisions, marriage, family, legacy, they choose someone from their own class. Someone suitable. The elevator arrives with a soft chime, and Luke steps aside with theatrical courtesy. "Have a good evening, Miss Simmons," he says pleasantly. "I'm sure we understand each other perfectly." As the elevator doors close behind her, Chantel leans against the back wall, her legs suddenly unsteady. Engagement. The word echoes in her mind like a death knell. Of course, William Dawson would be engaged to someone like Diana Ashford, someone beautiful and accomplished and appropriate for a man of his position. What had she been thinking? That their coffee conversations and charged moments meant something real? That a billionaire CEO would actually be interested in a cleaning lady with a teenage daughter and more dreams than money? By the time she reaches the parking garage, Chantel has built walls around her heart that feel as strong as steel. She won't make that mistake again. She can't afford to. But even as she drives home through the quiet city streets, even as she checks on sleeping Sophia and prepares for another day of careful budgets and measured hopes, she can't quite erase the memory of William's touch, the honesty in his voice when he'd said he couldn't stop thinking about her. Some connections, once made, refuse to be unmade. And sometimes the heart wants what it wants, regardless of logic or safety or the vast distances between different worlds. The question is, what happens when two people discover they're willing to risk everything for a love that should be impossible? Chapter 3. The next 3 days pass in a careful dance of avoidance. Chantel arrives for her shifts with military precision, timing her rounds to miss William's usual late-night presence. She cleans his office when she knows he's in meetings, leaves his coffee machine spotless but untouched, and ignores the way her heart sinks every time she finds his office dark and empty. Luke Reynolds' words echo in her mind like a warning bell: "Men like him don't end up with women like you." The truth of it cuts deeper than she wants to admit, but it also clarifies things in a way that almost feels like relief. She has responsibilities: Sophia's college fund, their rent, their carefully balanced life that leaves no room for romantic foolishness. But William notices her absence like a physical ache. He finds himself working later and later, hoping to catch a glimpse of her graceful movements in the hallway, listening for the soft sound of her voice offering coffee and conversation. When he finally asks Luke about the cleaning schedule, his business partner's knowing smile tells him everything he needs to know. "Having trouble sleeping, William?" Luke asks with false concern. "You've been here until nearly midnight every night this week." "Just catching up on paperwork," William lies, but they both know better. "You know, if you're having trouble with inappropriate workplace situations, HR has protocols for that," Luke continues smoothly. "Sometimes people get ideas above their station. Sometimes they need to be reminded of boundaries." The casual cruelty in Luke's voice makes William's jaw clench, but before he can respond, his assistant's voice comes through the intercom. "Mr. Dawson? There's a severe weather warning. They're suggesting all non-essential personnel leave the building within the hour." William looks out his window to see dark clouds gathering like an army on the horizon. The forecast had mentioned possible storms, but the speed with which the weather is deteriorating is alarming. "Thank you, Jessica. Make sure everyone gets home safely." Within an hour, the building is nearly empty except for essential security personnel and a skeleton cleaning crew. William should leave too. His penthouse apartment has a generator, supplies, everything he needs to ride out whatever storm is coming. Instead, he finds himself lingering, checking emails that could wait, reviewing reports that aren't urgent. He tells himself he's not waiting for Chantel. He tells himself he's just being thorough, responsible, dedicated to his work. But when he sees her figure moving past his office window with her cleaning cart, his heart lurches with something that feels dangerously close to relief. She's one of only 3 cleaning staff who stayed. The storm caught everyone off guard with its sudden intensity. Through his window, William watches the wind whip the trees below into a frenzied dance, sees the first fat raindrops splatter against the glass like tears. He waits until she's finished with the office across the hall, then steps into the corridor as she emerges. The moment she sees him, her carefully composed expression falters, and he catches a glimpse of something vulnerable in her dark eyes before she looks away. "Mr. Dawson," she says formally, her voice cooler than it's ever been. I thought you'd left with everyone else. I was just finishing up, William replies, studying her face. There's something different about her tonight, a distance that goes beyond professional courtesy. The storm's getting worse. Maybe you should consider heading home early. I have work to finish, Chantel says, moving past him toward the next office. The building management wants the executive floors done tonight, storm or no storm. Her tone is polite but dismissive, and William feels the rejection like a physical blow. What happened? 3 days ago, they were sharing coffee and intimate conversations. Tonight, she's treating him like a stranger. As if summoned by his thoughts, the lights flicker ominously. Outside, the wind has picked up to a howl that makes the windows rattle in their frames. Rain lashes against the glass in sheets so thick that the city lights below are barely visible. The building's intercom crackles to life, attention all remaining personnel. Due to severe weather conditions, the building is now under lockdown protocols. All exits are sealed for safety reasons. Please remain in your current location until further notice. Chantel stops so abruptly that her cleaning cart bumps into the wall. William sees her shoulders tense, sees her grip tighten on the cart's handle. Lockdown, she whispers, and for the first time since he's known her, she sounds truly frightened. It's just a precaution, William says gently, moving closer despite her obvious desire to maintain distance. The building's designed to handle severe weather. We'll be perfectly safe. But Chantel isn't thinking about structural integrity. She's thinking about Sophia, home alone during what sounds like the storm of the century. She's thinking about her daughter's fear of thunder, about the anxiety that grips the girl whenever her mother is late coming home. I need to call my daughter, she says, pulling out her phone with hands that aren't quite steady. The screen shows no signal, no connection to the outside world. The storm's probably affecting the cell towers, William explains, watching concern chase across her features. But the building has landlines. You can use the phone in my office. Chantel hesitates, torn between her need to contact Sophia and her determination to maintain distance from William. But maternal worry wins, and she follows him into his office, leaving her cart in the hallway. William's office feels different in the storm, more intimate somehow, with the rain creating a curtain of privacy against the windows and the emergency lighting casting everything in warm, golden tones. He gestures toward his desk phone, then retreats to give her space, but he can't help overhearing her side of the conversation. Sophia? Baby, are you okay? Chantel's voice is tight with worry. I know, honey, I know you don't like the thunder. No, I'm stuck at work. The building's in lockdown because of the storm. Yes, I'm safe. I'm going to be here all night, but I need you to be brave for me, okay? William watches Chantel pace behind his desk, her free hand gesturing as she talks, her voice shifting into the soothing tones of a mother comforting her frightened child. There's something achingly beautiful about her in this moment, fierce and protective and infinitely tender. Remember what we practiced? When you get scared, you think of 3 good things. That's right, your acceptance letter to the science camp, the A you got on your history project, and Mama coming home to you. I love you too, baby girl. So much. When she hangs up, Chantel stands with her back to William for a long moment, her shoulders rigid with the effort of holding herself together. Outside, thunder crashes like the sky is splitting open, and the lights flicker again before settling into a dim, amber glow. She's afraid of storms, Chantel says quietly, still not turning around. Has been since she was little. I should be there. You're a good mother, William says softly. She knows that. She knows you'd be there if you could. Do I? Chantel finally turns, and William sees tears she's trying desperately not to shed. Do I know that? Because right now, I feel like I'm failing at everything that matters. The raw honesty in her voice breaks something open in William's chest. This is the woman he's been thinking about for days, not the polite professional who's been avoiding him, but the real Chantel, with all her fears and fierce love and devastating vulnerability. You're not failing, he says, moving closer despite every instinct that tells him to give her space. You're raising a brilliant daughter while working 2 jobs and still finding energy to be kind to strangers. You're not failing, you're extraordinary. Am I? Chantel laughs, but there's no humor in it. Because your business partner seems to think I'm something quite different. Something that needs to be managed and contained. Understanding hits William like a physical blow. Luke talked to you. He made things very clear, Chantel says, finally meeting his eyes. About your engagement, about your world, about where someone like me fits into it. Which is nowhere. My engagement? William's voice is sharp with confusion. What engagement? To Diana Ashford, Chantel says, watching his face carefully. Your suitable fiancé from your suitable world. The disgust in William's voice is immediate and visceral. I am not engaged to Diana Ashford. I was, 2 years ago, but I ended it because I realized I didn't love her. I probably never did. But Luke said dash. Luke says a lot of things, William interrupts, anger flickering in his blue eyes. Usually in service of what he thinks is best for Dawson Enterprises. He's been pushing me to reconcile with Diana because he thinks it would be good for business, good for my image. He has no idea what's good for me. Relief and confusion wore in Chantel's expression. But he said men like you don't end up with women like me. Men like me, William repeats, his voice growing quiet and dangerous. What kind of man do you think I am, Chantel? Thunder crashes overhead, shaking the building, and the lights flicker again before settling into the warm glow of emergency power. In the amber light, William looks younger somehow, more vulnerable, stripped of the corporate armor that usually surrounds him. I think you're lonely, Chantel says honestly. I think you're tired of being seen as a bank account instead of a person. I think you work late because going home to an empty apartment is worse than staying in an empty office. You see too much, William says softly, but there's gratitude in his voice rather than anger. I see someone who's forgotten how to be happy, Chantel continues, her professional distance crumbling in the face of her natural empathy. Someone who's so surrounded by people who want something from him that he's forgotten what it feels like to be wanted for himself. Is that what you want? William asks, moving closer until he's standing just arm's length away. Me for myself? I want things I can't have, Chantel whispers, and the admission costs her something. I want things that don't make sense, that could destroy everything I've worked for. What if they didn't have to? William asks. What if wanting something real, something honest, something that makes you feel alive, what if that's worth the risk? Outside, the storm rages with increasing fury, but inside William's office, the air is thick with possibility and the kind of tension that comes from fighting attraction that refuses to be denied. They're close enough now that Chantel can see the storm reflected in William's eyes, can feel the warmth radiating from his body. This is impossible, she breathes, but she doesn't step away. I know, William replies, his voice rough with want and something deeper. I know it's complicated, I know it's dangerous, I know all the reasons we should walk away from each other. But I can't stop thinking about you, Chantel. I can't stop wanting you. The confession hangs between them like a bridge neither of them is sure they should cross. Thunder crashes again, the sound so close it feels like the world is ending, and in that moment of primal fear and elemental fury, something snaps in both of them. William reaches for her at the same moment Chantel steps toward him, and suddenly she's in his arms, her hands fisted in his shirt, his fingers tangled in her hair. They cling to each other like survivors of a shipwreck, seeking warmth and comfort and connection in the midst of the storm. We shouldn't, Chantel whispers against his chest, but her arms tighten around him even as she says it. I know, William murmurs into her hair, breathing in the scent of her, something soft and clean and utterly feminine that makes his head spin. I know we shouldn't. Tell me to let go, Chantel. Tell me to walk away. But instead of pulling back, Chantel looks up at him with eyes that are dark with want and fear and something that might be love. I can't, she whispers. I should, but I can't. The lights flicker again, plunging them into near darkness before the emergency system kicks in, bathing them in soft, intimate light. In that moment of vulnerability, with the storm raging around them and the rest of the world locked away, William cups Chantel's face in his hands and looks at her like she's something precious, something worth treasuring. You're beautiful, he says softly, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Not just physically, though you take my breath away. You're beautiful in your strength, in your kindness, in the way you love your daughter and take care of people who don't even know they need taking care of. Tears slide down Chantel's cheeks, but they're not tears of sadness. They're tears of recognition, of feeling seen and valued and cherished in ways she'd forgotten were possible. William, she whispers, his name a prayer on her lips. Say it again, he murmurs, leaning closer until his forehead rests against hers. Say my name again. William, Chantel breathes, and the sound of it in her voice makes something tight in his chest unfurl like a flower opening to sunlight. Have you ever felt torn between following your heart and protecting the people you love? Tell me in the comments about a time when love felt complicated. Your stories inspire these tales of passion and courage. The storm outside seems to be reaching its peak, wind howling like a living thing, rain lashing the windows with torrential force. But inside the circle of William's arms, Chantel feels safer than she has in years. This is dangerous territory, she knows that with every rational thought she possesses. But for the first time in her adult life, her heart is speaking louder than her fears. I need to tell you something, William says, his voice rough with emotion and something that sounds like confession. About who I really am, about this building, about everything. But before he can continue, the building's emergency lighting flickers once more and then goes out completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. In the sudden blackness, Chantel instinctively presses closer to William, her heart racing with a fear that has nothing to do with the storm and everything to do with the way her body responds to his nearness. The backup generators will kick in soon, William assures her, his arms tightening protectively around her. We're safe. But safety is a relative term when you're standing in the dark with a man who makes you feel things you've spent years trying to forget, when every breath brings you closer to crossing lines you've sworn never to cross. When the emergency lights finally flicker back to life, they illuminate two people who have moved beyond the point of no return, who have found in each other something worth risking everything for. Because sometimes love doesn't wait for the right time or the right circumstances. Sometimes it comes in the middle of the storm, demanding courage you didn't know you possessed and offering rewards you never dared to dream. Chapter 4. The emergency lights cast everything in a warm, intimate glow as William and Chantel stand wrapped in each other's arms, the storm raging outside their cocoon of unexpected safety. The building shudders with each gust of wind, but neither of them seems to notice anything beyond the circle of warmth they've created together. There's something I need to tell you, William says again, his voice soft but urgent. Something important about who I am. But Chantel shakes her head, pressing her fingers gently to his lips. Not tonight, she whispers. Tonight, you're not Mr. Dawson the executive. Tonight, you're just William, the man who works too late and drinks too much coffee and looks at me like I matter. William captures her hand, pressing a soft kiss to her palm that makes her breath catch. You do matter. More than you know. They move to the leather sofa in William's office, drawn by the need for comfort and warmth as the storm continues its assault on the building. William shrugs out of his suit jacket, draping it around Chantel's shoulders when he notices her shivering. The gesture is so naturally protective, so quietly intimate, that it makes her heart flutter. Tell me about Sophia, William says as they settle on the sofa, careful to maintain a respectable distance even as every fiber of his being wants to pull her closer. What's she like? Chantel's face lights up with maternal pride, transforming her from beautiful to radiant. She's everything I hoped I could be and never was. Brilliant, confident, kind. She wants to be an engineer, specifically, she wants to design sustainable energy systems. Says she's going to save the world one solar panel at a time. She sounds remarkable, William says, and he means it. Just like her mother. She's better than me, Chantel says softly. Braver. When I was her age, I was too afraid to dream big. I played it safe, made practical choices. She's not afraid of anything. What would you have done? William asks. If you hadn't been afraid to dream big? Chantel is quiet for a long moment, staring out at the storm. I wanted to start my own business, she admits finally. Consulting for small companies that couldn't afford the big corporate firms. I had ideas about making business strategy accessible to everyone, not just the wealthy. But then I got married young, got pregnant, and practical became more important than passionate. It's not too late, William says quietly. Dreams don't have expiration dates. Don't they? Chantel asks with a sad smile. When you're 34 with a teenager and bills that never stop coming, dreams start to feel like luxuries you can't afford. What if you could afford them? William asks. What if someone believed in your dreams enough to help make them possible? Something in his tone makes Chantel look at him sharply. William, you barely know me. Why would you dash? Because I see you, he interrupts, his voice intense with conviction. I see your intelligence, your strength, your incredible capacity for caring about people. I see someone who gave up her dreams to protect her child but never lost the fire that made those dreams worth having in the first place. Thunder crashes overhead, and in the brief darkness that follows, William reaches for Chantel's hand. When the emergency lights flicker back on, their fingers are intertwined, and neither makes any move to break the connection. Tell me about your dreams, Chantel says, studying his profile in the amber light. What did William Dawson want to be before he became an executive? William is quiet for so long that Chantel thinks he won't answer. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a whisper. I wanted to be a teacher, he admits. High school history. I wanted to help kids understand that the past isn't just dates and dead people. It's alive, it's relevant, it's the foundation everything else is built on. What stopped you? Chantel asks, though she suspects she already knows the answer. My father died when I was 22, William says. Left me a company, a legacy, a responsibility I wasn't ready for. Everyone told me I could make so much more of a difference with money and power than I ever could in a classroom. Do you believe that? William looks at her with eyes that hold years of doubt and disappointment. I used to. But lately, I wonder if I'm making any difference at all. If all the money and power in the world matter if you're too isolated to touch a single real life. You touched mine, Chantel says softly, and the admission surprises them both with its honesty. Did I? William asks, turning to face her fully. Because sometimes I think I dreamed our conversations, dreamed the way you look at me like I'm someone worth knowing. You didn't dream it, Chantel whispers, and suddenly they're leaning toward each other, drawn by gravity they can't resist. William's hand comes up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with reverent gentleness. Chantel, he murmurs, her name a prayer and a question and a promise all at once. I know this is crazy, she breathes, her eyes fluttering closed as he leans closer. I know it's impossible, I know it could ruin everything, but dash. But sometimes the impossible is the only thing worth reaching for, William finishes, and then his lips are on hers, soft and warm and perfect. The kiss is gentle at first, tentative, both of them afraid to want too much too fast. But then Chantel's arms wind around his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair, and William pulls her closer, deepening the kiss with a hunger that takes them both by surprise. When they finally break apart, they're both breathing hard, both trembling with the force of connection that feels like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once. This changes everything, Chantel whispers against his lips. I know, William replies, resting his forehead against hers. Are you sorry? Chantel looks into his blue eyes, sees the vulnerability there, the fear that she'll regret this moment of perfect honesty. Instead of answering with words, she kisses him again, pouring all her carefully guarded emotions into the connection between them. Outside, the storm begins to weaken, the wind dying to a whisper, the rain gentling to a steady patter against the windows. But inside William's office, a different kind of storm has begun, one that will either destroy them both or transform them into something neither of them ever dreamed they could be. They talk through the night, sharing stories and dreams and fears they've never voiced aloud. William tells her about the loneliness of growing up with everything money could buy but nothing his heart truly needed. Chantel shares the terror and exhilaration of raising a child alone, of making every decision knowing that someone else's future hangs in the balance. As dawn approaches, they're curled together on the sofa, Chantel's head on William's shoulder, his arms wrapped around her like he never wants to let her go. The emergency lights have given way to the soft gray light of morning, and with it comes the inevitable return of the real world. I should go, Chantel says softly, but she makes no move to leave the warmth of William's embrace. I know, William replies, his arms tightening around her. But not yet. Please, not yet. They both know this moment is precious, fragile, possibly the only one they'll ever have. In a few hours, the building will reopen, Luke Reynolds will return with his warnings and manipulations, and the vast differences in their worlds will become impossible to ignore. But for now, in the quiet space between storm and sunrise, they're just William and Chantel, two people who found each other in the darkness and chose to hold on. Whatever happens next, William murmurs into her hair, "I want you to know that this night, being here with you, feeling like myself for the first time in years, it's the most real thing in my life." "For me too," Chantel whispers, memorizing the feel of his heartbeat beneath her cheek, the scent of his skin, the way his arms make her feel safe and cherished and utterly protected. When the building's normal lighting flickers back on, signaling the end of the emergency lockdown, they both know their time is running out. But neither of them is prepared for how much it will hurt to step back into their separate worlds, to pretend that nothing has changed when everything has. Because some connections, once made, change the very foundation of who you are. And some love, once acknowledged, refuses to be contained by the boundaries others try to impose. The question is, will they be strong enough to fight for what they've found, or will they let the world convince them that some dreams are too dangerous to pursue? As building security announces the all-clear and the executive floors begin to show signs of returning life, William and Chantel reluctantly disentangle themselves, both knowing that the hardest part of their story is just beginning. Because falling in love in the middle of a storm is the easy part, it's fighting for that love in the harsh light of day that requires true courage. 3 days later, the memory of that night feels like a beautiful dream that Chantel isn't sure actually happened. She's back to her regular schedule, cleaning the executive floors during William's usual business hours, their paths carefully orchestrated not to cross. But the taste of his kiss lingers on her lips, and the memory of his arms around her makes her skin warm in the middle of the coldest moments. William, meanwhile, finds himself distracted in meetings, checking his watch constantly, hoping to catch even a glimpse of her in the hallways. He's left small gifts in his office, expensive coffee, a book of poetry, a single white rose, but they remain untouched, and he begins to wonder if that night meant as much to her as it did to him. The answer comes on Friday evening, when Chantel finally finds the courage to enter his office while he's working late. The gifts are gone, and in their place is a simple note in her careful handwriting, "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for the storm. Thank you for showing me that some impossible things are worth believing in. See." But before William can process the full meaning of her words, Chantel appears in his doorway, her cleaning cart abandoned in the hall, her dark eyes bright with determination and something that looks like decision. "We need to talk," she says, and William's heart stops at the serious tone in her voice. "Of course," he replies, standing so quickly that papers scatter from his desk. "Chantel, about the other night dash." "I've been thinking," she interrupts, stepping into his office and closing the door behind her. "About what you said, about dreams not having expiration dates. About the impossible being worth reaching for." "And?" William asks, afraid to hope, afraid to breathe. Chantel takes a deep breath, squaring her shoulders with the courage it's taken her 3 days to gather. "And I think you're right. I think some things are worth fighting for, even when everyone tells you they're impossible." The relief and joy that flood William's face make her heart skip, but before he can respond, she holds up a hand. "But I need you to know something first," she continues, her voice steady despite the way her hands are shaking. "I need you to know who I really am, what you'd be getting into if we try to make this work." Chantel dash. "I'm a single mother with $17 in my savings account," she says, the words coming out in a rush. "I work 2 jobs to make ends meet, I haven't bought myself anything new in 6 months, and my biggest dream is saving enough money for Sophia's college tuition. I'm not sophisticated or polished or any of the things men in your position usually want. I'm just me, stubborn and proud and probably too broken to be worth the trouble." William crosses to her in 3 long strides, taking her face in his hands with infinite gentleness. "You beautiful, impossible woman," he says softly. "Don't you understand? You're not too broken, you're too strong. You're not worth the trouble, you're worth everything. And I don't want sophisticated or polished. I want real. I want you. Even if it's complicated?" Chantel asks, tears making her eyes bright. "Even if people talk, if your family disapproves, if it affects your business?" "Especially then," William says fiercely. Because anything worth having is worth fighting for, and you, Chantel Simmons, are worth every battle I'll have to fight to keep you. The kiss that follows is different from their first, deeper, more desperate, filled with the knowledge that they're choosing each other despite every obstacle in their path. When they break apart, both breathing hard, Chantel sees something in William's eyes that makes her stomach flutter with anticipation and fear. "There's something I need to tell you too," William says, his hands still framing her face. "About who I really am, about this building." But before he can continue, the sound of voices in the hallway makes them spring apart. Luke Reynolds' voice carries clearly through the door, and with it comes the sound of heels clicking against marble, expensive heels that announce the arrival of someone used to being important. "She's here somewhere," Luke is saying. "Security says she never left the building after her shift ended." "This is ridiculous, Luke," comes a cultured female voice that drips with irritation and entitlement. "I shouldn't have to hunt down some cleaning woman just to find my fiancé." Chantel's blood turns to ice. Fiancé. The word hits her like a physical blow, and she sees her own shock and confusion reflected in William's face. "That's impossible," William whispers, but even as he says it, the door to his office swings open without so much as a knock. Diana Ashford stands in the doorway like an avenging angel, all blonde perfection in designer clothes that probably cost more than Chantel makes in 6 months. Her blue eyes take in the scene with laser precision: William's rumpled shirt, Chantel's flushed cheeks, the obvious intimacy of their interrupted moment. "Well," Diana says with a smile that could cut glass. "Isn't this cozy?" Chapter 5. The silence that follows Diana's entrance is deafening. Chantel feels the blood drain from her face as she takes in the woman standing in the doorway, tall, elegant, everything that money and breeding can create. Diana Ashford looks like she was born to stand in boardrooms and ballrooms, like she's never had a moment's doubt about her place in the world. "Diana," William says, his voice tight with anger and something that sounds like resignation. "What are you doing here?" "Looking for my missing fiancé, obviously," Diana replies smoothly, stepping into the office with the confidence of someone who belongs everywhere she goes. "When you didn't answer my calls, Luke suggested you might be working late again. Though he didn't mention you had company." Luke Reynolds appears behind Diana, his smile sharp with malicious satisfaction. "Miss Simmons, isn't it? I told you we understood each other perfectly." Chantel feels like she's drowning, like the ground has disappeared beneath her feet. Fiancé. The word echoes in her mind like a death knell. William told her he wasn't engaged, that he'd ended things with Diana years ago. But here she stands, claiming him like a possession, speaking with the casual authority of someone who knows exactly where she belongs. "We're not engaged," William says firmly, his eyes never leaving Chantel's stricken face. "Diana, I told you 2 years ago. "Oh, darling," Diana laughs, the sound like breaking crystal. "Don't be silly. Just because we had a little disagreement doesn't mean anything's actually changed. Mother and I have been planning the spring wedding. The invitations are already ordered." "Without consulting me," William says, his voice growing dangerous. "Why would I need to consult you about our wedding?" Diana asks with practiced innocence. "It's not like you have any other viable options." Her gaze flicks to Chantel with barely concealed disdain, and the message is clear: you are not a viable option. Chantel finds her voice, though it comes out smaller than she'd like. "I should go." "Yes," Diana agrees pleasantly. "You should." "Chantel, wait," William starts, but she's already moving toward the door, her dignity the only armor she has left. "I need to finish my rounds," she says quietly, not meeting his eyes. "There's still work to do." She slips past Diana and Luke with quiet grace, leaving behind the scent of her perfume and the wreckage of what might have been. William starts to follow, but Diana's perfectly manicured hand on his arm stops him. "Let her go, William," Diana says with false sympathy. "You're only making it harder for everyone involved." "Get your hands off me," William says, shaking off her touch with disgust. "Darling, there's no need to be dramatic," Diana continues, settling herself on his sofa like she owns it. "I understand you've been lonely, and I suppose she's pretty enough in a common sort of way. But surely you can see how impossible this whole situation is. The only impossible thing I see is your inability to accept rejection, William replies coldly. Luke steps forward, his expression serious. William, be reasonable. Your mother called the board meeting for Monday. The Patterson acquisition needs to be announced, the quarterly reports reviewed. Diana's family's investment firm is crucial to our expansion plans. And let's not forget the merger with Ashford Industries, Diana adds sweetly. Daddy's been so looking forward to combining our companies. It would be such a shame if personal complications interfered with business. The threat is subtle but unmistakable. William looks between Luke and Diana, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time, not friends or lovers, but strategists playing a game where his happiness is merely a piece to be moved around the board. You planned this, he says quietly. Both of you. You knew I'd be working late, knew she'd be here. We're trying to protect you from making a mistake that could destroy everything you've worked for, Luke says with false sincerity. Think about what you're risking, the company, your reputation, your family's legacy. And for what? A cleaning lady with a teenage daughter and dreams above her station? Don't, William's voice is deadly quiet. Don't you dare speak about her like that. Like what? Diana asks with wide-eyed innocence. Like someone who's trying to better her situation by seducing a wealthy executive? Because that's exactly what this looks like. You don't know anything about her, William says, his hands clenched into fists. I know enough, Diana replies, examining her perfect nails. I know she's desperate, I know she's calculating, and I know she's exactly the kind of woman who ruins men like you. But it's not too late, darling. We can fix this before it becomes a real scandal. Meanwhile, Chantel pushes her cleaning cart down the hallway with mechanical precision, her hands shaking so badly she can barely grip the handle. The conversation in William's office continues behind her, voices rising and falling in heated argument, but she forces herself not to listen. She has work to finish, a daughter to get home to, a life to rebuild from the ashes of her foolish dreams. Fiancé. The word haunts her with every step. How could she have been so naive? How could she have believed that a man like William Dawson would genuinely want someone like her? Luke Reynolds had tried to warn her, had spelled out the realities of their different worlds, but she'd let herself hope anyway. She's so lost in her mortification that she doesn't notice the figure waiting by the elevators until she's almost upon him. Marcus Moore, her younger brother, stands with his arms crossed and an expression that suggests he's been waiting for a while. Marcus? Chantel stops in surprise. What are you doing here? Marcus Moore is 31 years old, 6 feet of protective older brother energy despite being younger than Chantel by 3 years. He works construction, has calloused hands and a suspicious nature when it comes to anyone who might hurt his sister. Sophia called me, Marcus says grimly. Said you were working late again, said you've been different lately. Happy different. Figured I'd better come see what's going on. It's nothing, Chantel says quickly, but Marcus knows her too well to be fooled. Sis, you're shaking, he observes, moving closer. And you look like someone just told you Christmas was cancelled. What happened? Before Chantel can answer, the sound of raised voices from William's office carries into the hallway. Diana's laugh, sharp and victorious, cuts through the air like a blade. You made a fool of yourself over some corporate executive, Marcus says, and it's not a question. His face darkens with protective anger. Jesus, Chantel, what were you thinking? I was thinking that maybe, just maybe, someone could see past my uniform to who I really am, Chantel replies, her voice breaking slightly. I was thinking that maybe I deserved to be happy. You do deserve to be happy, Marcus says fiercely. But not with some rich boy who's slumming it until his real life calls him back. It wasn't like that, Chantel protests, but even as she says it, doubt creeps into her voice. Had it been like that? Had William been amusing himself with her while his real life, his fiancé, his social obligations waited in the wings? Wasn't it? Marcus asks gently. Sis, you're brilliant, you're beautiful, you're worth 10 of any society princess. But men like that, they don't marry women like us. They marry their own kind and keep us as their dirty little secrets. The brutal honesty of his words hit Chantel like a physical blow, but before she can respond, William's office door opens and he strides into the hallway, his face dark with fury and determination. "Chantel," he calls, moving toward them with urgent steps. "Please, I need to explain." No explanation necessary, Marcus steps protectively in front of his sister. She gets the picture pretty clearly. William stops short, taking in Marcus's defensive posture, Chantel's tear-bright eyes. "You don't understand. Diana's not my fiancée. We ended our engagement 2 years ago. Then why is she in there planning your wedding?" Chantel asks quietly. "Because she's delusional, because Luke thinks it would be good for business, because my mother has been pressuring me to reconcile with her," William says desperately. "But I don't want Diana. I want you. Do you?" Chantel asks, her voice gaining strength. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you want a lot of things. You want me for your late-night conversations and stolen kisses, but you also want to keep your real life separate and uncomplicated. That's not true. Isn't it?" Chantel's eyes flash with hurt and growing anger. "You've been working in this building for years, and I've been cleaning it just as long. But you never noticed me until a few weeks ago. Why now, William? What changed?" William opens his mouth to answer, then closes it, realizing how his honesty will sound. The truth is, he'd been so buried in his work, so isolated by his wealth and position, that he'd stopped seeing the people around him as individuals. Chantel had become visible to him only when his loneliness reached a breaking point. "That's what I thought," Chantel says softly, reading his silence correctly. "I was invisible until you needed someone to make you feel human again." "It started that way," William admits, his voice rough with desperation. "But it's not that way now. What I feel for you is real, Chantel. More real than anything I've ever experienced." Diana's voice carries from the office, "William, darling, are you coming back? We have so much to discuss about the wedding venue." The sound hits Chantel like a slap. Even if William isn't technically engaged, the fact remains that there's a woman in his office planning their future together while he's in the hallway making promises to the cleaning lady. "I need you to do something for me," Chantel says quietly. "Anything," William replies immediately. "I need you to tell me who you really are," she says, her dark eyes searching his face. "Not your title, not your position. Who are you, William? What's your last name? What do you really do in that office every night?" William's face goes pale. This is the moment he's been dreading, the revelation that will either bring them together or destroy any chance they might have had. "I'm William Dawson," he says quietly. "William Charles Dawson III." The name hits Chantel like a physical blow. Dawson. As in Dawson Enterprises, the name on the building, the company that employs her. She staggers slightly, and Marcus's steadying hand on her shoulder is the only thing that keeps her upright. "You're not just an executive," she whispers. "You're the owner. You're my boss. You're..." She trails off, the full magnitude of their situation crashing over her like a tidal wave. "I wanted to tell you," William says desperately. "I tried to tell you, but I was afraid you'd look at me differently. I was afraid you'd see the money instead of the man." "The money, yes, the man," Chantel replies, her voice growing cold. "Don't you understand? You own this building, this company, my job. Every conversation we've had, every moment between us. I've been completely at your mercy and didn't even know it. It doesn't have to change anything. It changes everything." Chantel's composure finally cracks, years of careful control giving way to raw emotion. "How can you stand there and pretend this is just about two people who care about each other? You could fire me tomorrow and I'd have no recourse. You could decide you're bored with your cleaning lady fantasy and destroy my entire life with a phone call. I would never. Wouldn't you?" Chantel asks, tears streaming down her face. "When the novelty wears off, when your real life starts making demands, when your mother and your business partner and your beautiful ex-fiancé convince you that you're making a mistake, what happens to me then? What happens to Sophia?" The questions hang in the air like accusations, and William realizes with growing horror that he has no answers that won't sound like promises he might not be able to keep. "I love you," he says simply, the words torn from somewhere deep in his chest. "Love," Chantal repeats, as if testing the weight of the word. "You love me, but you let me believe you were just another executive. You love me, but you never mentioned the fiancé who's currently in your office. You love me, but you've been lying to me from the moment we met." "I never lied to you," William protests. "You never told me the truth," Chantal counters. "And in my world, that's the same thing." Marcus steps forward, his protective instincts in full force. "I think this conversation is over. My sister's been through enough tonight." "This isn't over," William says, his blue eyes blazing with determination. "Chantal, please. Give me a chance to prove that what we have is real." "What we have," Chantal says softly, "is a fantasy that got out of hand. I'm a cleaning lady who forgot her place, and you're a billionaire who forgot his responsibilities. That's all this ever was." She turns toward the elevators, Marcus's protective presence beside her, leaving William standing alone in the hallway with the wreckage of their impossible dreams scattered around his feet. "Chantal," he calls one last time, her name a broken prayer on his lips. She doesn't turn around, but her shoulders shake with silent sobs as the elevator doors close between them, separating their worlds as effectively as if they were on different planets. Back in his office, Diana and Luke wait with satisfied smiles, ready to help him forget his momentary lapse in judgment and return to the life they've planned for him. But William stands in the empty hallway, staring at the elevator doors, feeling like he's just lost the only thing in his life that ever truly mattered. Because sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gaps between different worlds. Sometimes the weight of responsibility, expectation, and the fundamental unfairness of life crushes even the most beautiful dreams. But sometimes, just sometimes, love finds a way to fight back. And sometimes the people who seem to have the most to lose discover they have the most to gain by risking everything for what their hearts know is true. The question is, will William find the courage to choose love over convenience before it's too late? And will Chantal be able to forgive him for the lies of omission that have shattered her trust just when she'd finally learned to hope again? In the elevator, as Marcus wraps his arms around his sobbing sister, Chantal makes herself a promise. She will not be anyone's secret. She will not be anyone's consolation prize. And she will not wait for a man, any man, no matter how much she loves him, to decide whether she's worth fighting for. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from love that asks you to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's life. And sometimes the only way to find the love you deserve is to refuse to accept anything less than being someone's first choice, not their guilty secret. But as the elevator carries her away from the only man who's ever made her feel truly seen, Chantal can't help but wonder if walking away from impossible love is the same as walking away from the only chance at happiness she might ever have. Chapter 6. The weekend passes in a blur of forced normalcy. Chantal calls in sick to her cleaning job, unable to face the building that holds so many memories, so many shattered dreams. Instead, she throws herself into motherhood with desperate intensity, helping Sophia with college applications, baking cookies they don't need, reorganizing closets that are already perfectly organized. But Sophia isn't fooled. At 16, she's inherited her mother's emotional intelligence along with her fierce independence, and she watches Chantal with worried eyes. "Mom," Sophia says Saturday evening, finding Chantal staring out their small kitchen window at nothing. "What happened? And don't tell me nothing, you haven't hummed once since Friday night." Chantal turns to her daughter, seeing so much of herself in those intelligent dark eyes. How can she explain that she fell in love with a fantasy? That for a few beautiful, impossible days, she forgot who she was and where she belonged? "I made a mistake," Chantal says simply. "I let myself hope for something that was never really possible." "Was it a man?" Sophia asks with the directness of youth. "It was the idea of a man," Chantal corrects. "The idea that someone could see past our circumstances to who we really are. But people live in their own worlds, baby girl. Crossing between them isn't as easy as it seems in movies." Sophia studies her mother's face with uncomfortable perception. "You fell in love with someone who wasn't free to love you back." "Something like that." "Are you giving up?" Sophia asks. The question catches Chantel off guard. What do you mean? I mean, are you going to let one person's inability to choose you convince you that you're not worth choosing? Sophia's voice carries a strength that reminds Chantel that her daughter is growing into a formidable woman. Because that seems like giving other people way too much power over your happiness. Before Chantel can respond, her phone rings. Unknown number, but something makes her answer anyway. Miss Simmons? The voice is elderly, refined, with the kind of authority that comes from decades of wielding power. This is Susan Dawson. I believe we need to talk. William's mother. Chantel's stomach drops, but her voice remains steady. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Mrs. Dawson. On the contrary, my dear. I think we have quite a lot to discuss. I'm hosting a small gathering tomorrow evening, the annual Dawson Enterprises board dinner. I'd like you to attend as my personal guest. The invitation is so unexpected, so completely outside anything Chantel could have imagined, that she's momentarily speechless. I don't understand, she finally manages. I think you do, Susan says smoothly. 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. The Ritz-Carlton downtown, Meridian Ballroom. Formal attire, naturally. I've taken the liberty of having something appropriate delivered to your address. Mrs. Dawson, I can't possibly dash. Miss Simmons, Susan's voice cuts through her protests with steel-wrapped velvet. My son has been many things in his 36 years: dutiful, responsible, predictable. But he has never been happy. Until this week. Until you. The admission stops Chantel's objections cold. I may not approve of the circumstances of your relationship, Susan continues, but I've watched my son transform from a man going through the motions of living into someone with fire in his eyes again. That kind of transformation doesn't happen because of casual amusement. It happens because of love. Your son has responsibilities, Chantel says quietly. Expectations. A life that doesn't include women like me. My son has choices, Susan corrects firmly. Just as you do. The question is whether you'll both be brave enough to make them. 7 o'clock, Miss Simmons. Don't disappoint me. The line goes dead, leaving Chantel staring at her phone in bewilderment. Sophia raises an eyebrow with impressive teenage skepticism. Let me guess, she says dryly. The plot thickens. Meanwhile, across the city, William sits in his penthouse apartment, staring at a glass of whiskey he has no intention of drinking. The weekend has stretched endlessly, filled with calls from Luke about Monday's board meeting, messages from Diana about wedding venues, and a crushing silence from the only person whose voice he actually wants to hear. He's tried calling Chantel a dozen times, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. He's written and deleted 17 text messages, each one sounding more desperate than the last. He's even considered showing up at her apartment, but that feels like stalking, like using his wealth and resources to corner someone who's made it clear she wants space. The sound of his private elevator arriving makes him look up in surprise. Only his mother has access to his penthouse, and Susan Dawson never visits without calling first. Mother, William says, standing as she enters his living room like a queen surveying her domain. This is unexpected. So is your behavior lately, Susan replies crisply, settling herself on his white leather sofa with practiced elegance. Avoiding Diana's calls, missing the Thornton charity gala, distressing Luke with talk of restructuring the board. Really, William, what's gotten into you? I fell in love, William says simply, surprising them both with his directness. Susan studies her son's face for a long moment. At 62, she's a woman who's spent decades navigating the treacherous waters of high society, a woman who knows the difference between infatuation and transformation. Tell me about her, she says quietly. She's brilliant, William begins, then stops. How can he explain Chantel to his mother? How can he make her understand that love isn't about matching resumes or social registers? She's brilliant, he starts again, and kind and stronger than anyone I've ever met. She works 2 jobs to support her daughter, she has a degree in business administration, and she sees solutions to problems that my MBA-educated executives miss entirely. And she cleans buildings for a living, Susan adds without judgment. She takes care of people, William corrects. She sees what needs to be done and she does it, whether that's making coffee for an exhausted executive or sacrificing her dreams to give her daughter a better life. Do you love her? Susan asks bluntly. More than I knew it was possible to love anyone, William replies without hesitation. And does she love you? William's face crumples slightly. I think she did. Before she found out who I really am. Before Diana showed up claiming to be my fiancé. Before I proved that I'm exactly the kind of man who keeps women like her as secrets. Are you? Susan asks. That kind of man? I don't want to be, William says desperately. But I don't know how to be anything else. How do I bridge the gap between our worlds? How do I prove that what I feel for her isn't just guilt or rebellion or some midlife crisis? Susan stands, smoothing her impeccable skirt. You start by making a choice, William. Really making it, publicly and irrevocably. You stop hedging your bets and you declare yourself. What do you mean? I mean, tomorrow night's board dinner is going to be very interesting, Susan says with a smile that's equal parts maternal love and strategic calculation. I suggest you decide what kind of man you want to be before then. Sunday evening finds Chantel standing in front of her bedroom mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The dress Susan Dawson sent is a masterpiece of understated elegance. Deep midnight blue that makes her skin glow, cut to emphasize her natural grace without being overly revealing. Professional styling assistants had arrived that afternoon, transforming her into someone who could walk into the Ritz-Carlton without anyone questioning her right to be there. You look like a queen, Sophia breathes from the doorway, her eyes bright with pride and excitement. I feel like an imposter, Chantel admits, smoothing nervous hands over the silk. Good, Marcus says, appearing behind Sophia with his most protective expression. Because that means you remember who you really are underneath all the fancy packaging. He'd insisted on driving her to the hotel, and his presence in her small apartment's doorway, 6 feet of suspicious older brother energy stuffed into his best, and only, suit, makes Chantel feel simultaneously protected and terrified. I still don't understand why you're doing this, Marcus continues. This woman is his mother. This is enemy territory. Maybe, Chantel agrees. Or maybe it's time I stopped letting other people decide what I'm worth. The Ritz-Carlton downtown is everything Chantel expected and more, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers, the kind of old money elegance that speaks in whispers but commands absolute attention. As Marcus's construction worker truck pulls up to the valet stand, Chantel sees the uniformed attendant's brief moment of confusion before his professional mask slides into place. You sure about this, sis? Marcus asks one more time. No, Chantel admits. But I'm doing it anyway. The Meridian Ballroom is a showcase of wealth and power, filled with men in $1,000 suits and women dripping in diamonds. Chantel enters with her head high and her shoulders straight, drawing on every ounce of dignity she possesses to walk into a room where she recognizes no one and everyone recognizes that she doesn't belong. She spots William immediately, even though his back is to her. He stands near the bar with Luke Reynolds and several other men she recognizes from the executive floors, his broad shoulders tense beneath his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Diana Ashford hangs on his arm like an expensive accessory, her blonde perfection complementing his dark elegance in the way that magazine spreads are designed to capture. They look perfect together, Chantel realizes with a stab of pain that takes her breath away. They look like they belong in this world of crystal and silk and casual power, like they were born to stand in rooms like this making decisions that affect thousands of lives. Miss Simmons. Susan Dawson appears at her elbow like a guardian angel in Chanel. You look lovely. Thank you for the dress, Chantel says quietly. Though I'm still not sure why I'm here. Because my son is about to make the biggest decision of his life, Susan replies, steering Chantel toward a quieter corner of the room. And I wanted to make sure he had all the information he needed to make it wisely. I don't understand. Tonight, the board is expecting William to announce his engagement to Diana, Susan explains matter-of-factly. Luke has been pushing for it for months, claiming it would stabilize William's image and strengthen certain business relationships. Diana's father controls a significant investment firm that would be valuable to our expansion plans. Chantel's heart sinks. Of course. Business marriages, strategic alliances, this is how William's world operates. Love is a luxury that people like him can't afford. But, Susan continues, her voice gaining strength, I've spent the last week watching my son transform from a dutiful automaton into a man with passion and purpose. And I've done some research on you, Miss Simmons. Research? Your academic records, your work history, your financial situation, your daughter's achievements. Susan's smile is sharp but not unkind. I know about the administrative position you lost when your husband abandoned you, the way you've built a stable life for your daughter through sheer determination, the business courses you've been taking online in your spare time. Chantel flushes, embarrassed to have her struggles laid bare. I don't know what any of that has to do with tonight. It has everything to do with tonight, Susan says firmly. Because it tells me that you're not a gold digger or an opportunist. You're a woman of substance who's been fighting battles that would destroy weaker people. You're exactly the kind of person I'd want my son to choose, if he's brave enough to choose you. Before Chantel can respond, the sound of a microphone being tapped draws their attention to the front of the room. Luke Reynolds stands at the podium, his smile confident and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, Luke begins, thank you for joining us for this year's board dinner. Before we begin our formal presentations, I believe our CEO has an announcement to make. All eyes turn to William, who stands frozen near the bar with Diana still clinging to his arm. Chantel watches his face, sees the moment his gaze finds her across the crowded room. The shock in his blue eyes is immediate and intense, followed quickly by something that looks like hope and terror in equal measure. William? Luke prompts, and there's something in his voice that sounds like a challenge. Diana squeezes William's arm possessively, her perfect smile never wavering. Go on, darling, she murmurs, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Tell them about our wonderful news. The room falls silent, elegant conversations dying as everyone waits for William to speak. Chantel holds her breath, her heart hammering against her ribs as she watches the man she loves stand at the crossroads between the life he's expected to live and the life he might choose to fight for. William looks at Diana, beautiful and appropriate and everything his world expects him to want. He looks at Luke, whose partnership has built the foundation of his success. He looks at the board members and investors and social architects who've spent years carefully constructing his perfect life. And then he looks at Chantel, standing in the corner like courage wrapped in midnight blue silk, and suddenly none of the rest matters. I do have an announcement, William says, his voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. He gently but firmly removes Diana's hand from his arm, stepping away from her with deliberate precision. For the past several years, I've been living the life that everyone else thought I should live. I've dated the right women, attended the right events, made the right business decisions. I've been the perfect CEO, the perfect son, the perfect representation of everything Dawson Enterprises stands for. His eyes never leave Chantel's face as he continues. But perfect isn't the same as happy. Perfect isn't the same as real. And I've recently learned that real is the only thing worth having. A murmur of confusion ripples through the crowd. Diana's face goes pale, then red with anger. Luke's expression shifts from confident to alarmed. William, Luke warns, perhaps this isn't the time dash. This is exactly the time, William interrupts, moving toward the podium with sudden purpose. Because I've realized that the most important business decision I'll ever make isn't about acquisitions or mergers or stock prices. It's about choosing the kind of life I want to live and the kind of man I want to be. He reaches the front of the room, but instead of staying behind the podium, he steps around it, walking directly toward Chantel through the stunned crowd. Conversations die completely as everyone watches the CEO of Dawson Enterprises cross the ballroom like a man on a mission. Miss Chantel Simmons, William says, loud enough for everyone to hear, works the night shift cleaning the offices in this building. She has a degree in business administration, a 16-year-old daughter who wants to save the world, and the most brilliant strategic mind I've ever encountered. He stops directly in front of her, close enough that she can see the determination blazing in his blue eyes, the set of his jaw that says he's made his choice and nothing will change it. She's also the woman I'm in love with, William continues, his voice gentle now but still carrying across the silent room. The woman who makes me want to be better than I am. The woman who sees possibilities where I see problems, who finds beauty in simple kindness, who proves every day that worth has nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with the courage to care about other people. Tears stream down Chantel's face as she stares at him, hardly believing what she's hearing. So here's my announcement, William says, dropping to one knee in front of her as gasps echo through the ballroom. Chantel Simmons, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that love is the only currency that really matters? Will you help me build a life that's messy and real and absolutely perfect because it's ours? The ring he pulls from his pocket isn't the massive diamond that Diana would have expected. It's a simple solitaire, elegant and classic, and exactly right for the woman he's chosen over everything else his world has to offer. William, Chantel whispers, her voice breaking with emotion. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, William replies, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he's just done. I love you, Chantel. Not the idea of you, not the fantasy of you. Your strength, your intelligence, your capacity for love, your daughter's laugh, your way of making coffee like it's an act of service. I love all of it, and I choose all of it, publicly and permanently. Chantel looks around the ballroom, sees shocked faces and whispered conversations, sees Diana's furious tears and Luke's calculating expression. She sees Susan Dawson watching with approval and something that might be pride. Most importantly, she sees William, not the CEO, not the billionaire, but the man who worked late into the night seeking connection, who shared his fears and dreams over perfect coffee, who chose love over convenience and courage over comfort. Yes, she whispers, then louder, stronger, yes, William Dawson. I'll marry you. The ring slides onto her finger like it was made for her, and when William stands to kiss her, the applause that erupts from some corners of the room mingles with the shocked silence from others. But Chantel doesn't care about the approval or disapproval of strangers. She cares about the man holding her like she's precious, like she's chosen, like she's exactly what his heart ordered. I love you too, she murmurs against his lips. All of you. Even the parts that come with board meetings and social obligations and way too much money. We'll figure it out, William promises, resting his forehead against hers. Together. Later, after the chaos of explanations and congratulations and hurried departures, after Diana's dramatic exit and Luke's cold fury, after Susan Dawson's surprisingly warm embrace and whispered welcome to the family, William and Chantel find themselves alone on the hotel's terrace, the city spread out below them like a carpet of stars. No regrets? Chantel asks, studying his profile in the moonlight. Only one, William admits, pulling her closer against the cool night air. What's that? That I waited so long to ask you, he says, pressing a kiss to her temple. That I wasted so much time being the man everyone else wanted me to be instead of the man you make me want to become. We have the rest of our lives to figure it out, Chantel reminds him, echoing his earlier promise. Starting now, William agrees. Starting with the most important decision we'll make together. Which is whether to have the wedding before or after we finish that Patterson acquisition, William says with a grin. Because I'm going to need my new business consultant to help me restructure the entire deal. Business consultant? Chantel raises an eyebrow. Did I forget to mention that part of my proposal? William's eyes twinkle with mischief and love. Dawson Enterprises is about to hire its first strategic development consultant. Someone brilliant and experienced who understands both business theory and practical application. Someone who can see solutions that Ivy League educations miss. Someone who used to clean your offices, Chantel adds dryly. Someone who took care of everything she touched and made it better, William corrects. Including me. 6 months later, the wedding takes place in a garden ceremony that perfectly reflects their journey together, elegant but not ostentatious, filled with people who matter rather than people who are expected to matter. Sophia walks her mother down the aisle with tears of joy in her eyes, Marcus gives William the protective brother speech of a lifetime, and Susan Dawson dances with her new daughter-in-law while whispering business advice and family stories in equal measure. The Patterson acquisition, restructured according to Chantel's innovative suggestions, becomes the most successful merger in Dawson Enterprises history. Chantel's consulting firm, launched with William's backing but built on her own expertise, rapidly becomes the go-to resource for companies seeking strategic development that prioritizes both profit and people. But the real success is quieter, more personal. It's William coming home to a house filled with laughter and homework help and family dinners around a table that seats exactly the right number of people. It's Chantel working in a penthouse office that overlooks the building where they first found each other, solving problems for clients who value her insights rather than tolerate her presence. It's Sophia thriving in advanced placement classes and early admission programs, supported by parents who believe in her dreams and resources that make those dreams possible. It's Sunday mornings in bed with newspapers and coffee and the kind of lazy intimacy that comes from being completely known and utterly cherished. It's the proof that sometimes love really can bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle, transform any life if you're brave enough to choose it over everything else the world insists you should want. If this story touched your heart, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Dear Love Diaries for more tales of passionate love that conquers all boundaries. What story would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss a moment when love unfolds in our diary.